Use extraordinary in place of very special. Very special means better, greater, or otherwise different from what is usual. And extraordinary means very unusual or remarkable. Example: Sophia's voice has an extraordinary hypnotic quality. Thus, extraordinary means very unusual or remarkable and can be used in place of very special. Use exact in place of very accurate. Very accurate means correct in all details, and exact means correct or true in every way. Example: experts give you the exact details of something. Thus, exact means precise, error-free, and correct and can be used in place of very accurate. Use obvious in place of very clear. Very clear here means easy to perceive, understand, or interpret without any doubt or confusion, and obvious means easily perceived or understood. Example: there is an obvious difference between the two. Thus, obvious means crystal clear and can be used in place of very clear. Use serene in place of very calm. Very calm here means not showing or feeling nervousness, anger, or other strong emotions. And serene means very peaceful, calm, and free from disturbance. Example: when saints close their eyes, they look serene. Thus, serene can be used in place of very calm. Use exasperating in place of very annoying. Very annoying means causing great irritation and annoyance, and exasperating means intensively irritating and frustrating. Example: your son is really exasperating. Thus, exasperating can be used in place of very annoying. Use swamped in place of very busy. Very busy means having a great deal to do, and swamped means very busy, having more work than one can easily manage. Example: I can't call you now because I'm swamped with work. Thus, swamped means very busy. Use energetic in place of very active or lively. Very active means engaging or ready to engage in physically energetic pursuits, and energetic means showing or involving great activity or vitality. Example: after working all day, no one feels energetic. Thus, energetic means very active or lively. Use bosom in place of very close or intimate. Very close or intimate means closely acquainted or familiar, and bosom means very close or intimate. Example: John is my bosom friend. Thus, bosom means very close friend. Use dolorous in place of very depressed. Very depressed means in a state of unhappiness or despondency, and dolorous means feeling or expressing great sorrow or distress. Example: the family has been dismal and dolorous throughout the storm. Thus, dolorous means very mournful, sorrowful, or depressed. Use filthy in place of very dirty. Very dirty means greatly covered or marked with an unclean substance, and filthy means disgustingly dirty or extremely dirty. Example: this school is filthy with no sanitation. Thus, filthy means very dirty. Use captivating in place of very interesting. Very interesting means holding or catching the attention, and captivating means holding your attention by being extremely interesting. Example, these stories are captivating. Thus, captivating means extremely interesting or appealing. Use slack in place of very loose. Very loose means not firmly or tightly fixed, and slack means not taut or held tightly in position. Example, it's a slack rope. Thus, slack means very loose. Use archaic in place of very old-fashioned. Very old-fashioned means not modern, out of fashion, and archaic also means very old-fashioned. Example, some particular words in English are archaic. Thus, archaic can be used in place of very old-fashioned. Use thunderous in place of very loud. Very loud means producing or capable of producing much noise, and thunderous means extremely loud. Example, the singer got a thunderous applause from the audience. Thus, thunderous means very loud. Use rapid in place of very quick. Very quick means moving fast or doing something in a short time, and rapid means happening in a short time or at a great rate. Example, the 1990s were a period of rapid change or growth. Thus, rapid means very quick or fast. Use hushed in place of very quiet. Very quiet means making little noise or no noise, and hushed means of a voice or conversation quiet and serious. Example, they talked in hushed voices while everyone was sleeping. Thus, hushed means very quiet. Use terrifying in place of very scary. Very scary means frightening or causing fear, and terrifying means causing extreme fear. Example, the nightmare I saw last night was terrifying. Thus, terrifying means very scary. Use powerful in place of very strong. Very strong means having the power to perform physically demanding tasks, and powerful here means of a person or animal very strong and muscular. Example, John is a powerful person. Thus, powerful means very strong. Use severe in place of very hard. Very hard here means something that's difficult to understand or solve, and severe here means demanding great ability, skill, or resilience. Example, he has to take a severe test of stamina. Thus, severe means very difficult to understand and can be used in place of very hard. Use dire in place of very serious. Very serious here means significant or worrying because of possible danger or risk, and dire means extremely serious or urgent. Example, misuse of drugs can have dire consequences. Thus, dire means extremely serious. Use soaring in place of very high. Very high means of great vertical extent, and soaring means reaching a great height. Example, Burj Khalifa is a soaring building. Thus, soaring means very high or reaching a great height. Use perturbed in place of very anxious. Very anxious means feeling or showing worry, and perturbed means feeling anxiety or concern. Example, John seemed perturbed about the noises the children were making. Thus, perturbed means disturbed, worried, and anxious, and can be used in place of very anxious. Use soaked in place of very wet. Very wet means covered or saturated with water or another liquid, and soaked means extremely wet. Example, it's raining heavily. You'll get soaked in the rain if you go out. Thus, soaked means very wet. Use dazzling in place of very bright. Very bright means reflecting much light, which causes some object to shine. And dazzling means extremely bright, which blinds the eyes temporarily. Example, the sunlight was dazzling. Thus, dazzling means very bright. Use immaculate in place of very clean. Very clean means free from dirt, marks, or stains. And immaculate means perfectly clean, neat, or tidy. Example, the shirt is immaculate. Thus, immaculate means very clean. Use excellent in place of very good. Very good means of high quality or standard, and excellent means extremely good or outstanding. Example, John did an excellent job. Thus, excellent means very good. Use expeditiously in place of very fast. Very fast means at high speed, and expeditiously means very quickly. Example, the work was done expeditiously. Thus, expeditiously means very fast or very quickly. Use pellucid in place of very clear. Very clear means some transparent object through which you can see, and pellucid means translucently clear. Example, the trees reflected in the pellucid water. Thus, pellucid means very clear or transparent object through which you can see. Use thrilled in place of very excited. Very excited means very enthusiastic and eager, and thrilled means very excited. Example, I was really thrilled when I saw the soaring peak of the mountain. Thus, thrilled can be used in place of very excited. Use weighty in place of very heavy. Very heavy means difficult to lift, and weighty means weighing a great deal. Example, a fat man is weighty to lift. Thus, weighty can be used in place of very heavy. Use amiable in place of very friendly. Very friendly means behaving in a pleasant and kind way, and amiable means showing a friendly manner. Example, John is kind towards everyone. He is really an amiable person. Thus, amiable means very friendly. Use intelligent in place of very clever. Very clever means quick to understand, learn, and apply ideas. And intelligent means showing high level of intelligence and cleverness. Example, John is an intelligent person. Thus, intelligent means very clever or brilliant. Use disparate in place of very different. Very different means not the same as another, and disparate means different in every way. Example, the American culture is disparate from that of India. Thus, disparate means very different. Use avaricious in place of very greedy. Very greedy here means having intense and selfish desire for wealth or power, and avaricious means having extreme greed or desire for wealth or material gain. Example: John is an avaricious person by nature. Thus, avaricious means extremely greedy and can be used in place of very greedy. Use modest in place of very humble. Very humble here means low estimate of one's importance, and modest means unassuming in the estimation of one's abilities or achievements. Example: John refuses to take any credit. He is a modest man. Thus, modest can be used in place of very humble. Use benevolent in place of very kind. Very kind means showing a very friendly, generous, and considerate nature, and benevolent means well-meaning, kindly, and helpful. Example: my teacher is a benevolent person. Thus, benevolent means very kind and can be used in place of very kind. Use slovenly in place of very messy. Both very messy and slovenly mean very untidy or dirty. Example: he has slovenly hair. Thus, slovenly means very messy or untidy. Use terrified in place of very scared. Very scared means very fearful or frightened, and terrified means extremely fearful. Example: I was terrified at seeing a lion approaching me. Thus, terrified means extremely afraid and can be used in place of very scared. Use valorous in place of very brave. Very brave means showing great courage, and valorous also means showing great courage in the face of danger. Example: John knows no danger. He is really a valorous person. Thus, valorous means very brave. Use lengthy in place of very long. Very long here means taking a great deal of time, and lengthy means of considerable or unusual length. Example: I don't want to involve in a lengthy discussion. Thus, lengthy means very long. Use cautious in place of very careful. Very careful means to make sure of avoiding future dangers, and cautious also means to avoid potential dangers. Example: be cautious about clicking on spammy links. Thus, cautious means to be very careful. Use effortless in place of very simple. Very simple means of something easily understood or done, and effortless means something uncomplicated that doesn't require any effort. Example: making tea is effortless for me. Thus, effortless can be used in place of very simple. Use ancient in place of very old. Very old here means something that belongs to the past or the earliest time, and ancient means something that belongs to the very distant past. Example: the Chinese civilization is one of the ancient civilizations in the world. Thus, ancient means something very old. Use petrified in place of very afraid. Very afraid means very frightened, feeling fear or anxiety, and petrified means extremely frightened. Example, my little son is petrified of being on his own in the house at night. Thus, petrified means very frightened and can be used in place of very afraid. Use distraught in place of very upset. Very upset here means being unhappy, disappointed, or worried. And distraught means very worried and upset. Example, they were all distraught over the loss of their grandmother. Thus, distraught means extremely worried, unhappy, or upset. Use sagacious in place of very wise. Very wise means a person who is able to make good judgments based on knowledge and experience. And sagacious means having the ability to judge well. Example, John makes good judgments. He is really a sagacious person. Thus, sagacious means the person having the ability to make good judgments and can be used in place of very wise. Use adorable in place of very cute. Very cute means attractive or pretty, especially in a childish, youthful, or delicate way. And adorable means inspiring great affection and delight because of appealing appearance. Example, John has two really adorable cats. Thus, adorable means very cute. Use overjoyed in place of very glad. Very glad means feeling great pleasure or happiness, and overjoyed means extremely happy. Example, my parents were overjoyed at my success. Thus, overjoyed means extremely happy and can be used in place of very glad. Use gaunt in place of very thin. Very thin means having too little flesh or fat on the body, and gaunt means over thin because of suffering, hunger, or age. Example, John is an old, tall, and gaunt person. Thus, gaunt means very thin. Use apprehensive in place of very nervous. Very nervous means getting anxious or worried, and apprehensive means anxious or fearful that something bad will happen. Example, John feels apprehensive about being on his own in the house at night. Thus, apprehensive means fearful or anxious and can be used in place of very nervous. Use sleek in place of very smooth. Very smooth means having an even and regular surface, polished, and sleek means smooth or glossy. Example, Sophia has sleek hair. Thus, sleek means very smooth. Use sluggish in place of very slow. Very slow means not quick or fast, and sluggish means slow moving. Example, my bike feels sluggish. There is something wrong with it. Thus, sluggish means operating or moving very slow and can be used in place of very slow. Use scrawny in place of very skinny. Very skinny means of a person unattractively or unusually thin, and scrawny means very thin and bony. Example, John, an old man, has a scrawny physique. Thus, scrawny means very thin or skinny. Use delicious in place of very tasty. Very tasty means a food having a pleasant flavor that appeals to tongue, and delicious means highly pleasant to the taste. Example, everyone likes delicious homemade food. Thus, delicious means highly tasty and can be used in place of very tasty. Use excruciating in place of very painful. Very painful here means of a body part affected with pain, and excruciating means extremely painful. Example, John has an excruciating pain in his lower back. Thus, excruciating means very painful. Use frail in place of very weak. Very weak means having little physical strength or energy, and frail means of a person very weak or delicate. Example, my grandfather is frail now. Thus, frail means physically weak and can be used in place of very weak. Use frequently in place of very often. Very often means regularly or frequently, and frequently means regularly or habitually. Example, they visit London frequently. Thus, frequently means very often. Use ferocious in place of very wild. Very wild means having or displaying a violent attitude, and ferocious means severely fierce, cruel, or violent. Example, it's a ferocious beast. Don't go close to it. Thus, ferocious means very wild. Use scalding in place of very hot. Very hot means having a high degree of heat, and scalding means extremely hot. Example, the coffee was scalding. Thus, scalding means very hot. Use ravenous in place of very hungry. Very hungry means feeling or showing the need for food, and ravenous means extremely hungry. Example, John didn't eat all day. He is ravenous now. Thus, ravenous means very hungry. Use towering in place of very tall. Very tall means something or someone of great or more than usual height, and towering means extremely tall. Example, Burj Khalifa is a towering building. Thus, towering means extremely tall and can be used in place of very tall. Use stingy in place of very mean. Very mean means someone who doesn't want to spend money, and stingy means a close fisted person, a person who doesn't spend money. Example, John's boss is a stingy fellow. Thus, stingy means close fisted and can be used in place of very mean. Use perplexed in place of very confused. Very confused means someone who is unable to understand or think clearly, and perplexed means of a person unable to think clearly, logically, and decisively. Example, the students were completely perplexed after hearing the questions. Thus, perplexed means very confused. Use perilous in place of very risky. Very risky means full of the possibility of danger, failure, or loss, and perilous means extremely dangerous or risky. Example, the journey John undertook last year was quite perilous. Thus, perilous means extremely dangerous and can be used in place of very risky. Use minuscule in place of very small. Very small means of a size less than usual, And minuscule means extremely small or tiny. Example, John had run out of food. He ate only two minuscule pieces of cake. Thus, minuscule means extremely small and can be used instead of very small. Use mind numbing in place of very boring. Very boring means something not interesting, and mind numbing means extremely boring. Example, it was such a mind numbing film that I nearly fell asleep during it. Thus, mind numbing means extremely dull and boring and can be used in place of very boring. Use deafening in place of very noisy. Very noisy means making a lot of noise, and deafening means making so much noise as to make it impossible to hear anything else. Example, the singer got a deafening applause from the audience. Thus, deafening means extremely noisy and can be used instead of very noisy. Use gleaming in place of very shiny. Very shiny means of a surface reflecting light because it's very clean. And gleaming means very clean or shining. Example, those white shoes are gleaming. Thus, gleaming means very bright and clean and can be used in place of very shiny. Use huge in place of very large. Very large means something of a great size, extent, or capacity, and huge means something extremely large or enormous. Example, Burj Khalifa is a huge building. Thus, huge means extremely great size and can be used instead of very large. Use obese in place of very fat. Very fat means a person or animal having excessive flesh, and obese means extremely fat. Example, John has grown obese. Thus, obese means overweight or extremely fat and can be used instead of very fat. Use affluent in place of very rich. Very rich means someone who has an abundance of wealth, and affluent also means someone who has a lot of wealth. Example, John owns three huge companies. He is really an affluent person. Thus, affluent means very rich. Use hilarious in place of very funny. Very funny means something comical that causes great laughter or amusement, and hilarious means something extremely amusing. Example, his jokes are really hilarious. Thus, hilarious means something causing a great laughter and can be used in place of very funny. Use hideous in place of very ugly. Very ugly means something or someone who is unpleasant and unattractive in appearance, and hideous means extremely ugly. Example, the washroom was absolutely hideous. Thus, hideous means very unattractive and can be used in place of very ugly. Use brief in place of very short. Very short in this context means something not lasting for long or something of little length, and brief means something that doesn't last for long. Example, John made a brief visit to his old house. Thus, brief means not lasting and can be used in place of very short. Use desolate in place of very sad. Very sad means feeling great unhappiness, and desolate also means feeling great unhappiness, misery, and loneliness. Example, John felt desolate after his father died. Thus, desolate means extremely unhappy and can be used in place of very sad. Use freezing in place of very cold. Very cold means very low temperature, which causes trembling, and freezing means extremely cold, causing trembling. Example, today is freezing. Thus, freezing means having low temperature, causing trembling, and can be used in place of very, very cold. Use effortless in place of very easy. Very easy means something that can be done or achieved without great effort, and effortless means something that doesn't require great physical or mental exertion. Example, for me, writing an essay is effortless. Thus, effortless means extremely easy and can be used in place of very easy. Use fatigued in place of very tired. Very tired means drained of strength, vitality, and energy because of arduous effort, and fatigued means extremely tired due to physical or mental exertion. Example, he was fatigued by the arduous journey he undertook last week. Thus, fatigued means very tired. Use atrocious in place of very bad. Very bad means of a low standard or quality, and atrocious means extremely bad. Example, some poets attempted atrocious imitation of good poetry. Thus, atrocious means having extremely poor quality and can be used instead of very bad. Use indolent in place of very lazy. Very lazy means not willing to work or use energy, and indolent means wanting to avoid physical or mental exertion. Example, John doesn't want to engage himself in any work. He is really an indolent fellow. Thus, indolent means very lazy. Use destitute in place of very poor. Very poor means someone who doesn't have wealth, and destitute means extremely poor, someone who doesn't have wealth. Example, the flood made thousands of people destitute. Thus, destitute means describing penniless condition and can be used in place of very poor. Use furious in place of very angry. Very angry means a strong feeling that makes you want to hurt someone. And furious means extremely angry or having a strong feeling of anger. Example, John is now furious. Don't come close to him. Thus, furious means full of anger and can be used in place of very angry. Use gorgeous in place of very beautiful. Very beautiful means something or someone who is very attractive, and gorgeous means very pleasant and attractive. Example, your baby is absolutely gorgeous. Thus, gorgeous means something or someone who is very beautiful and can be used in place of very beautiful. Use costly in place of very expensive. Very expensive means something that's very high priced, and costly means something that costs you a lot. Example, iPhone is a costly cell phone. Thus, costly means very high priced and can be used in place of very expensive. Use essential in place of very important. Very important means something highly necessary, and essential means something extremely necessary. Example, good vision is essential for a pilot. Thus, essential means something that's needed very much and can be used instead of very important. Use cutthroat in place of very competitive. Very competitive means something highly demanded, and cutthroat also means highly demanded. Example, IELTS is one of the most cutthroat exams in the world. Thus, cutthroat means something that people want very much.